George Carlin wasn't just a comedian. He was a truth teller, a man who could take life's most uncomfortable realities and throw them in your face, wrapped in humor. For decades, he stood on stage, not to entertain in the traditional sense, but to wake people up. He didn't sugarcoat, didn't hold back, and certainly didn't care if you got offended. That's what made him one of a kind. Carlin didn't do fluffy routines about silly observations. Instead, he dug deep into society's cracks and exposed what was really there. His comedy was raw, biting, and unapologetic. He wasn't out to make friends or allies. His goal was to make you think, even if it hurt. Here's a look at all that went along his jokes. A comedian who didn't just tell jokes. George Carlin wasn't your average comedian. He didn't walk up on stage just to make people laugh and forget their problems for a while. No, he had bigger plans. Carlin used comedy like a hammer, breaking apart the comfortable lies people tell themselves about society, politics, and life. His routines weren't just funny, they were eye-opening. He made you laugh, but he also made you think, which isn't something most comedians dare to do. Take, for example, his famous routine about stuff. On the surface, it seemed like a simple, relatable joke about how we all have too much junk. But he also talked about how we buy bigger houses just to store more stuff, and now we pack tiny versions of our stuff when we travel. It was hilarious because everyone could see themselves in it. But if you really listened, there was a deeper message. Carlin was pointing out about how obsessed we are with material things, how we let them take over our lives. It wasn't just a joke, it was a critique of consumerism wrapped in humor. Carlin also took on heavier topics, the kind most comedians wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Politics, religion, the environment, he went there. He called out hypocrisy, corruption, and human ignorance in a way that was brutally honest, but still was somehow funny. He didn't just tell jokes, he made people question everything they thought they knew. What made Carlin different was his ability to turn hard truths into something you couldn't stop laughing at. He didn't soften the blow or sugarcoat his opinions. He just told it like it was, and that's why his comedy still hits hard today. He wasn't just entertaining, he was holding up a mirror and daring you to take a good hard look at yourself and the world around you. He wasn't trying to please anyone. George Carlin didn't care if you liked him, that's what made him so powerful. He didn't go on stage to win over the crowd or get standing ovation. He wasn't there to make people feel comfortable or validated. He was there to say what he believed, no matter how it landed. And if he didn't like it, that was your problem, not his. Most performers want to be loved. They want to hear applause and see smiling faces. But Carlin was different. He didn't soften his words or make them more palatable. He didn't dodge controversial topics to avoid backlash. If anything, he leaned into the discomfort. He wanted people to squirm because he knew that that's where the truth lived, in those moments when you're forced to confront something you'd rather ignore. Carlin wasn't on anyone's team, and that's what made him so hard to pin down. People on the left and right tried to claim him, but he didn't belong to either side. He didn't trust politicians, corporations, or big institutes, no matter their labels. His big club bit summed it up perfectly. He talked about how the rich and powerful controlled everything, from the government to the media, and how the rest of us were just along for the ride. It was harsh, but it was the truth, and Carlin wasn't interested in sugarcoating the truth. He also didn't let everyday people off the hook. He believed the problems in society weren't just about corrupt leaders, they were about us, about how easily distracted and complacent we become. And that's why his comedy was so sharp. He wasn't there to coddle anymore, or anyone. He was there to wake them up. At the end of the day, Carlin wasn't trying to be popular or likable. He was trying to be honest, and that's what made him unforgettable. He didn't play it safe. He didn't hold back. He said what he needed to say, even if it ruffled feathers. And in a world where everyone's afraid to step on toes, that courage is kind of rare. The power of words. Carlin loved words. He just didn't use them. He dissected them, twisted them, and exposed their contradictions. One of his most famous routines, 7 words you can't say on television, wasn't a joke about censorship. It was a deep dive into why society labels certain words as bad. For Carlin, words weren't the problem. It was how people use them. There's nothing wrong with words, he said. It's the intention behind them that matters. But society didn't see it that way. Instead of addressing context, we focus on banning certain words as if that solves everything. Today, the debate over language is more heated than ever. Social media platforms, workplaces, and schools have strict rules about what can and can't be said. Carlin's critique of censorship feels eerily relevant. Are we solving anything, or are we just rearranging the deck chairs on a sinking ship? The Big Club. Carlin's routine about the Big Club is one of his most iconic. In it, he lays out a simple but devastating truth. There's a small group of people who run everything. They control the government, the media, and the economy. They make the rules and we follow them. It's a big club, he said, and you ain't in it. Carlin wasn't exaggerating. Even today, a handful of corporations control most of the media that we consume. A small percentage of the population owns the majority of the wealth. The gap between the rich and the rest of us keeps growing. Carlin saw this decades ago, and he wasn't afraid to call it out. But he didn't just blame the elites, he blamed us too. He believed we were too distracted, too apathetic, and too willing to accept the status quo. And that's exactly what the people in power count on. They don't want us to question the system, they want us to play along. He didn't believe in sides. One of the reasons Carlin's comedy still resonates is that he refused to pick a side. He didn't align himself with any political party or social movement. In fact, he was deeply skeptical of groups in general. He believed that when people come together in groups, they lose their individuality and stop thinking for themselves. That's why it's ironic when people today try to claim Carlin as their own. Whether it's conservatives, liberals, or anyone in between, they all want to believe Carlin would agree with them. But the truth is that he probably wouldn't. He saw flaws in everyone. Carlin didn't care about being liked or agreed with. He cared about pointing out the truth, even if it made everyone uncomfortable. Giving up on humanity. By the end of his career, Carlin's comedy had taken a darker turn. He didn't believe humanity was capable of fixing its problems. In fact, he thought we were doomed. The planet will be fine, he said. It's the people who are screwed. Carlin didn't believe in saving the world. He thought that it was too late for that. But he didn't see this as a tragedy. For him, it was just the natural course of things. Species come and go. The Earth adapts. Humans, he believed, were just another failed experiment. But even in his cynicism, there was a sliver of hope. Carlin believed in the power of individual thought. He believed that if people could see through the lies and think for themselves, maybe, just maybe, things could change. It wasn't much, but it was something. George Carlin passed away in 2008, but his words have never been more relevant. The issues he talked about, censorship, inequality, corruption, they're all still the same. If anything, they've gotten worse. Carlin wasn't a prophet. He didn't have all the answers, but he had a way of cutting through the noise and exposing the uncomfortable truths. He didn't care if you liked him or agreed with him, he just wanted you to think. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we need more of today.